Come on over. Come on down.
Come on down to the barbecuer. Oh, we should. Here, hang
Oh, no. There we go.
on.
Welcome back. Alright, time for the intro. In 3, 2, 1. This intro was copyright claimed by the Walt Disney Corporation. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very groovy episode of Tuesdays with Moire, where we will be discussing some of Disney's cult classics from the 2000s. Are they worth the hype, or is it just pure nostalgia? You decide. I'm your host, Ian Taylor. Joining me tonight is my wonderful co-host, musician, filmmaker, and epic beardman, Devin Kane. And we have a very special guest, the long-awaited return of Canadian animator Drew Adams. How's it going tonight, guys? How are you doing on the first day of fall?
It's been a beautiful day so far, and thank you guys so much for having me back on the podcast. I've really been looking forward to this.
Nice. For people who
Yes, we've been looking forward to having you back here. I'm happy to have you back on the first day of fall, which hopefully you remember.
The 21st day of September.
Boo. I knew you guys were stupid.
Man, I have to plug somebody. There's this guy whose name I always forget, but every year he posts this super elaborate video pertaining to the 21st night of September. It's a remix of the song, and he'll come up with like an unbroken shot of many different things happening, and he ups his game every single year, releasing on the 21st night of September, which happens to be his birthday. I'll put a link in the live feedback channel, but I highly recommend it. If you just look up, 21st night of September, you'll find it, and all the ones he's done over the last few years.
Damn.
Also, it's my buddy Brady's birthday, so shout out to him.
Oh, hey, happy birthday, man! If you're listening, have a great birthday, man. And for those who are just joining in, just for real quick summation, Drew, why don't you tell our lovely audience what you do?
So thank you. I am a visual effects animator. I work with 2D television animation, so I draw things by hand like fire and lightning and explosions. And I just recently concluded my work on season 3 of the science fiction adventure show Final Space.
Woo!
Woo! That's gonna be epic.
It is epic. I've seen it.
And to plug ever so shamelessly, it did officially just recently release on Canadian Netflix and internationally, so you can now legally watch this show outside of the US.
Yay!
Huzzahs are in order.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Screw you, HBO Max. Doesn't come in Canada.
We don't want to throw too much shade on the lovely streaming platforms that we graciously host our shows.
Yeah, this is a Disney episode. We can shit on Warner Bros. As much as we want.
Okay. Oh boy.
Oh.
I like Warner Brothers.
Oh.
This show's not going to be good for getting job prospects for anybody, is it?
No.
Hey, I also like Disney too.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that, as we will be discussing a trio of 2000s cult classics starting with The Emperor's New Groove, the meme classic. And we have decided that I will be introducing Treasure Planet. Devin, you said you want to introduce Atlantis. Drew, would you be okay with introducing The Emperor's New Groove and a little bit on the backstory on Kingdom of the Sun, the film that was originally meant to be? Spoilers, by the way, for all 3 films. Continue.
All right. Yeah, I'd be happy to, and I'll do my best not to ramble horribly, because for our dear listeners, this movie has a backstory worth digging into. If you can find the banned and highly deleted behind-the-scenes documentary, The Sweatbox, produced by the wife of musician Sting, you will learn all manner of nonsense that goes into what it takes to make an animated film. Script rewrites, revisions, chaos behind the scenes, disputes with music, directors, and it's actually really fun to see, in particular, if you're an animation fan, just how much work goes on behind the scenes. When you watch an animated film, it's usually one cohesive whole. It's an hour and a half, start to finish. It's got David Spade in it. It's got Eartha Kitt. It's got some musical numbers. It's great. But then you look at the behind the scenes and you can see just how much work, how many dozens and even hundreds of people it can take to create one single piece of film. And it's not a straight line. It's so many rewrites and setbacks and small pieces of chaos. So I strongly recommend trying to track down this behind the scenes documentary. Disney did not license and is not official, and that's why it's really tough to track down.
And that's why it took so long to come out too, right? Like, it was
Oh,
originally going to be included in the special features, but Disney basically just put the ban hammer on it, and the copy was lost until somebody uncovered it, basically.
They basically just edited together, like, the last bit about the song that Sting put together after all the other music he wrote didn't work out for the movie because the movie kept changing. I was just watching this documentary, in fact, and I highly recommend it to anybody that gets into any kind of creative turmoil, working on group projects with people, just seeing, that these problems are not immune to the big people in the big leagues either. Especially Disney. Like, this is just part of the process, and you can tell how they really wrestled, just trying to struggle trying to put this idea together, and they had this completely different concept for it from the beginning, but they didn't really have a solid script. So Sting was writing music kind of in the dark, and trying to come up with the themes while they didn't have a solid script. And it's very frustrating, and people are quick to say, oh, it would have been so much better if they released the original, but I mean, I don't know, it's hard to say with everything that went down. It was a very enlightening watch. It's actually why I made the episode title on the banner Mousweat, because I imagine Mickey or whoever the corporate entity of Disney was probably sweating bullets, seeing that documentary and all the problems that went into it.
And also replicates the feeling of a sweatshop. So there you go. Drew, What was Kingdom of the Sun originally going to be about?
Oh dear, from what pieces that I've managed to gather together, it was originally a more dark and cinematic story about Incan and Mayan culture and mythology, and Eartha Kitt's character Yzma, who in the Emperor's New Groove is much more comedic, had a much darker and much more arguably a very compelling story to her. A character who wanted to gain power for herself, essentially to try and blot out the sun itself. Her character blaming the sun for withering her, turning her old, making her ugly when she used to be young and youthful and beautiful. And I mean, even in the finished product, Eartha Kitt is just a force to be reckoned with when it comes to acting. She's just brilliant.
Oh yeah, rest in peace. She was absolute tour de force. She embodied the character so well, and man, anytime I saw her in the behind the scenes, just embodying her character, the way she acted and yelling, it was just as entertaining as seeing the finished animation of her character.
Yeah,
like
it's like inches away from being motion capture. She just captures the characters so well. And another thing that we need to mention, this was going to be a musical originally. There were whole songs that were recorded. Eartha Kitt recorded a song called Snuff Out the Light. She recorded it. They did the rough animation for it. The song is on the official soundtrack. But plans changed when Disney came around and said, you know what? We really don't want yet another musical. We want more of a comedy. And oh, by the way, you have 9 months to make all of these changes. So there was originally going to be a brother played by Owen Wilson. His character had to be cut. There was going to be a love interest. That whole subplot had to be cut. And the only song from the Kingdom of the Sun, I believe, that made it into the movie was Perfect World at the beginning of the movie. Every other song had to be cut. The script had to be completely changed around. And frankly, like, this may be a bit of an unpopular thing to say, but I actually think it was kind of a happy accident. Like, it would have been great to see the original vision of Kingdom of the Sun, for sure, but I personally don't think this movie would be held in the same regard If it was Kingdom of the Sun, I think it would have been neglected as a film that's like a little too dark or kind of a generic Disney musical. It would just become another Pocahontas. Like, I don't think it would be the comedic cult classic that it is today. But
yeah, I mean, I recall their reaction to the first screening of it, saying, all the ingredients of there. Like, if I describe it to you on paper that all these things are in it, it sounds like the greatest thing. But for some reason, it just doesn't come together, and that was their reaction. First coming from the screening, although Sting himself was saying, it was actually better than I thought it would be, and they're like, "Oh, fuck off." And I like seeing the uncensored, unscripted people behind Disney just being people, human beings. Like that's how
I know,
and I guess there's something to self-censorship and preserving their image and legacy, whatever. But I like seeing people just being people. Who were behind some of the things that I grew up and loved as a child. It just humanizes it more. It's seeing that. So I wish Disney would own up to it, that this is how things were.
Oh yeah.
It was an outside thing behind them. But that's, the fact the fact you have to go out of your way to find this is a bit sketchy. But I do think, it just shows kind of the reality of what's behind any creative projects. And, it's easy to dream up like this perfect movie that it could have been. But then again, so many frames. Like when I came back to watch Emperor's New Groove, I hadn't seen it in years, and suddenly it just hit me how many of these frames became memes. Like so many moments of this film,
So many lines.
just had so much mimetic value, and it's kind of been preserved and come alive just for people in our age group. So I would have been about, if this came out in 2000, I would have been about 5 when this came out.
Mm-hmm.
So this film played perfectly, I think, to people our age. And it just has that same power. So it is hard to, but I think what we got does have value in that, where I was genuinely laughing, revisiting it at moments that I totally forgot about or weren't expecting for whatever reason. When they were stuck in the closet, that just had me like dying. I don't know why.
Well, there's so much to like the voice acting and the animation that adds to the humor. Like there's a part where Kronk, aka one of the best villain characters ever, like tries to wake up Yzma, and she wakes up with the cucumbers on her face, and he just goes like, "Ah!" But the way he says that, the way he screams, is just so perfect. And there's so many lines in this movie where it's like, if it was delivered any differently, like even the slightest bit of changes to the line delivery, and the joke would have fallen flat on its face. But so many jokes land, like, either to the comedic delivery or just really great comedic timing, and it makes me amazed that all of this had to be rushed out, and all of the comedic elements were probably written last minute because it's all so clever.
I mean, I think that perfectly segues into just how deeply like rewatching this film, I took so much of this for granted when I was young. The brilliant comedic interplay between John Goodman and David Spade as Pacha and Cusco. They just have such a dynamic with one another.
Yeah, and can we say, like, this meme movie, like, beyond all of the memes, this is a surprisingly wholesome, totally not gay movie about, like, becoming friends and getting over your own ego. And I forgot how much of an irk, like, Cusco has in this movie. He is a major D-bag at the start of the movie, but it just it all makes sense in the context of his character, and it makes you want to see him change all the more. And I mentioned this was like Klaus in that sense, with a similar character arc in that movie. And this movie, I feel like, nails it. Not quite as well as Klaus, but it still does a good job. And it's nice that this comedic, mimic movie has like some emotional value underneath it, unlike one of the other films we're talking about next.
That's so funny you mentioned that, though, because when I watched Klaus years later, I was like, man, he's got a real,
Cusco
Jesper's got a real Cusco vibe to him. I'm like,
Absolutely.
man, he feels really David Spade to me. And it was so funny. I think that speaks to this film's strength, though, that after it is now the year 2021, so 21 years later, this movie still has left an impression on me.
Mm-hmm. It's left an impression on tons of people, and I was kind of worried going back. I'm like, okay, is this just gonna be nostalgia bait, or people just like this because of the memes? But there's so much quality to the pacing and the jokes, and like the kitchen scene, I was just laughing like non-stop. Like the comedic timing of the scene, all of the like build up and payoff, and there's kind of an art. Shafirless Productions made a great video on this movie where it's like nonsense humor is very hard to get right, and the trick is just quick pacing. Like, don't draw out the joke for too long. Like, why doesn't Yzma or Cusco notice each other when they're giving out their orders? Who knows? Who cares? Go along with it. But the film doesn't linger on it too long that, that kind of approach to the humor works. And it just makes it so much funnier because you're just thinking back like, wait, why didn't he notice them back there? Why did the man's suitcase have a pile of food that was way higher than his actual suitcase? Like, dwelling on it adds to the humor.
And and that's the weird thing with pacing is like sometimes if a pacing is too brisk, then it doesn't feel like it, really takes time to let you soak in what's happening, the characters, the scenery. But sometimes a brisk pace is needed in order to keep up the energy. And I feel like by the time everyone got to this point in the process where they were wiping the slate clean and they had that tight deadline, I think that fed into the pacing of the film where they're just make this go as quick as possible without cutting out too much and just keeping everything feeling fresh. And I think that led to some very zany ideas in the last minute, and it gives that comedy kind of that air of freshness. I think there was actually, this reminds me of a quote that I remember one of the guys saying, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but it was I think before one of the screenings. It says there's an air of hope in the terror of it all. I don't know. I'm probably butchering what he said, but there was another line in the sweatbox that this is also around one of the screenings. But he says, whenever you do one of these screenings and you pour your heart and soul into this to be criticized, it's like you're going up there, getting your hands cut off and your pants pulled down, and you're bleeding out of the stumps of where your hands used to be, and you can't pull your pants back up.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Man, why don't we have more Disney documentaries like that? Like, we almost had something similar with, I don't know if you guys saw the Frozen 2 behind the scenes, where, like, there's a lot of people admitting that was a troubled production. Like, the editor had to go to work from midnight to 3 in the morning. Not 3 in the morning. 3 in the morning to midnight every day of the week, just to make sure the film was edited, that like they didn't have time to follow the script. The animators were just constantly stressed out, but there was that air of like Disney fakeness to it. Like they just couldn't quite delve into what they wanted to say, but they said like just enough to show that it was like, oh, it was a trouble production, but it was good in the end. Like there's a scene where the producer was like, it's entirely rushed, but we just gotta get it done. Like he looks like he's about to cry. He looks like there's literally a gun held at him at the end of the camera. And it's like you almost had it. You almost had the feeling of a rush, like a real production, but there's just that Disney niceness plastered all over it. But
it's like it's everything that they're not saying in between cuts that you can't help. It's like even the footage that Disney did release at the end of the tape on Emperor's New Groove. It's Sting talking about the music, and he's saying how it's been a long 3-year journey, and I'm hoping that what we made the people will resonate with. And he just seems so defeated at that point.
Yeah.
When you know what's happening, and the music is like the song that's in there is just this kind of this mellow sentimental song, which is such a contrast to all the zaniness with Tom Jones and everything else that like the music that ended up being the film. They went through like 2 different or 3 different composers by the end after Sting had been on it for the longest time, and so they almost let Sting's music go in the end just to say, hey, at least it wasn't all for nothing.
No,
and
exactly.
you can just hear him letting out like deep sighs in between, the takes in that interview. Just like, damn it.
Why'd I get wrapped up in this? But he still wrote Perfect World, and it's such a catchy song, and I feel like that's more popular than the actual credit song, admittedly, but I think there's a good reason for that, because it just sets the tone so well. Like, he literally has a theme song guy, and again, the nonsense humor is like, why does he have a theme song guy? I don't know, just go along with it. And he's saying about, like, how perfect he is. It just perfectly establishes, like, the film's not taking itself too seriously. It knows what it is. It's very, it's very self-aware and very in your face. Like, it just, the kind of film you're getting into right away, and I love intros that just get you in that mindset so quickly.
And with all that said, I think it's probably the best case scenario that something did get made after all this effort. Although there is something to be said about Disney's appropriation of culture, I suppose, where they it starts off innocently enough, like, hey, I want to make a film about Machu Picchu and show these kind of cultural things, but then the end product is like a Machu Picchu themed Vegas park. It's just it becomes so distorted by the end result, and it's fun for a movie, but I don't know. I'm not from Machu Picchu. I don't even know if that civilization exists, the ones that they're representing, but I don't know. It just seems like such a stark contrast of what it's supposed to represent, and then what it becomes. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it feels like they're just like using the backdrops as a way to like shake up the subject matter, and it unfortunately these days just blatantly pander to their audience. But like these guys, you could tell there was at least some passion behind the culture. Like they actually went to like they actually went to Incan like temples and societies, and a few of them even learned the language. And like for example, Pacha means earth in the Incan language, and I think Kronk means idiot or moron and the Incan language. Like there was enough passion for the culture, like like the Lion King, like Hercules, that like yes, there's some cultural appropriation involved, but there was some hurt behind it at least. Where nowadays it's just like, all right, you just feel like you're using all of this cultural details for blatant pandering, for feeling important by doing like small work.
It's like they take these artistic motifs and ideas from another culture that has its own history, but then injecting familiar Western story ideas into it just to make it fit for a Western audience. I mean, there's elements of that. Although now that you're talking about the names, it reminds me of something that David Spade was saying. His character had a name change from Kingdom of the Sun to New Groove. It was Cusco by the end of the film, but originally it was Manco. And you guys are laughing because you're men of culture, I know. But David Spade asked, or they were asking David Spade why the name change, and he says, I think it means pussy in Japanese, but that isn't what bothered them. It's the fact that it means bad movie in Turkish. So.
Yeah, man. I also gotta say, I normally hate David Spade, but he is just perfect as Cusco. And if you hate David Spade, guess what? You get to watch his character get punched and eaten a bunch of times throughout the movie, so there's that cathartic value to it as well.
There is a lot of David Spade suffering perpetually throughout this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and his whininess just really fits the character. Like it's really annoying and grainy in other movies, but here it's like that's the point. Like it's supposed to be obnoxious. It's supposed to drive characters insane. That's what makes like Pacha's like this wholesome, nice guy that tries to see the good in people, and he has to deal with like the biggest egotistical idiot, and you can just see like the little twitches and behavior in him. Is like at one point it's like, yo, he told me to see the good in everyone, but you proved me wrong. He just starts beating the shit out of him. Like it's just driving him nuts, and it's so fun but so wholesome to see. Like it's a great like character arc too. It's not just there for entertainment value.
I mean, again, if you hate David Spade, this is a great movie to watch because he gets kicked around. It's like people who hate Tom Cruise should watch either Magnolia or Edge of Tomorrow.
Oh, definitely Edge of Tomorrow. I mean, he straight up dies multiple times in Edge, so I feel like that has the edge.
And then you see his whole Chad ego kind of break down in Magnolia. Which is great. I still think that was a great performance of his.
Yeah, me too. That's one of the better aspects of that movie. But what else to talk about in The Emperor's New Groove? Like, the music is great. We talked about that. It's like very zany, very crazy. And I think the last composer they hired that wasn't Sting, like the actual composer behind the music, I keep forgetting his name. I feel bad about this, but he only had like 2 months to compose the music, and like the chase scene that they have is like really funny, but the music like adds so much to the comedy, like the like it makes it so much funnier. The final chase at the end is the animation also looks really good. Like there's some like jankiness here and there. Like there was some background extras where it's like, all right, they're just standing there. Like you don't need them to breathe or move or anything. But janky details like that add to the charm. So I feel like hand-drawn animated films get a bit of a pass in that regard, because it's like, at least it feels human. It doesn't feel like it was all just made in a computer. It was like, oh, okay, somebody fucked up, but I feel like it was a person fucking up, and not just the next biggest AI crafted perfect Unreal 4 engine just messing something up.
But on that note, though, I actually do want to comment on the really beautiful style of 2D animation that the Emperor's New Groove really capitalizes on.
Yes.
We've seen a bit of a trend with newer, especially, Pixar animated films that have a very, very solidified, unified style. The characters from Moana could fit right next to Frozen, who could fit right next to several characters from Wreck-It Ralph,
And
who
Tangled.
could fit right and Tangled, and there's this very solid art style that works for them, and it's very distinct and it's very, very recognizable. What I admire so much about Emperor's New Groove is that they really dove in with some abnormal styles of character design, right? So like this is some nonsense that really captivates me personally. Like the way that if you look at the characters, they have so many curving and right angles built into them. It's not, it's hyper exaggerating their proportions to make them look as if they've been carved out of stone themselves, or if they're really, Incan engravings on walls or temples. It's so amusing to me to see these characters with very pointy and jagged elements with such a nice flow to them, move and dance about. And I don't envy any of the animators who had to try and make these move. Like, Yzma, I think, is a fantastic example, because if you look at her face, the way that she talks, the way that her mouth moves, this is me being a nerd as an animator.
It's so
I love
expressive.
the pointy jawbones that they've given her, as if like she's
how long is that been there?
as if she's basically just a skull with skin stretched over it. Like it's such
it really is.
It's such a good design.
And not just her, like Kronk design is hilarious, like how he's basically a tank on legs. Like his legs are so skinny and the rest of his body is jacked, and Pacha's like this huge round guy with like a pointy chin and like a wide smile. Like he's just like, he looks like a wholesome guy. And it's kind of like something Pete Docter mentioned of character designs, where it's like, it's great to make a character design that's familiar with audiences, but it's even better to make a character design where the shapes reflect the character. And this is a perfect example of that with all of the character designs. Even like some of the smaller characters, like the old man. Like he looks so unique with like his skinny legs and his long hat that's like constantly dangling around, and like his jaw that like latches out just a bit too far. Like there's so much detail put into like even the smallest characters.
I think they say that like the best character designs are ones that you can recognize easily from their silhouette.
Yeah, you know everything about the character just by looking at them.
Oh yeah, I'm actually rewatching some of these sequences because I just had my VCR here and I just popped it in, and this is great, just kind of reliving some of these moments. And I love the transitions that they do in these films where they match up faces. Like when Kuzco first tells John Goodman's character to fuck off, it cuts to him looking stoically, or he turns and looks stoically, and then it cuts to his statue in the exact same profile, and then Yzma smashing the hammer. And I just love those creative match cuts that they create, which can be tricky to do in live action, but you can perfectly replicate no problem with just tracing paper and animation. So I love that. And there's even one scene where they start flashing like black and white in like a stroboscopic thing, and I'm like, that's a tricky thing to do with people with epilepsy. But I guess they probably had a discussion about how many frames are we allowed to do with that and how fast of a rate, because they're trying to replicate lightning.
Yeah.
But I love the stylistic choices and the bold colors that they use in this, and I like how the villains are evil, but in such an over-the-top way that it doesn't seem malicious. Like even Kronk is this lovable, aloof, just kind of dumb guy who's morally conflicted, and he ends up being a lovable character, even though he's basically a pawn for Yzma's evil scheme, more or less.
Yeah, it's very self-aware.
I have to mention the Spinach Puffs. If you ever try making them, Binging with Babish does an episode where he recreates it, and we've tried making those. They are fucking delicious. I highly recommend making them.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, I heard they're delicious. I mean, come on, it's Kronk's recipe.
My secret or my recommendation is to add a little bit of garlic butter with it. Just lays it on top as you're cooking.
That sounds so good. I'll have to add that to my list. I'm not normally a fan of spinach, but I'll definitely give it a try. What do you think Kronk's dessert was?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Well, spinach puffs won't really fit the time period, but I'm gonna go with chocolate souffle because spinach puffs are like kind of fancy. A little bit, like, sure, they're like snack foods, but it's also like somewhat fancy in design. So
it takes a lot of preparation. You got to take all the, you have to take all the I'm at a loss for words. Puff pastries. You got to pull the spinach, and you have to make a whole mixture with feta and other things, and dish the right amount in, and make sure that they don't explode when you put them together. It's quite a process to put together, but they're absolutely like delectable.
Nice.
So I recommend doing.
Yeah, speaking of that scene where it's just like a Kronk, this is kind of important. What about dessert? Well, we guess we have time for dessert. It's like, why do you have time for dessert? But again, that's what makes it so funny is those like question making. And another moment I have to point out is I turned into a cow. Can I go home? You're excused. He just gets to be excused for some reason, but
and his whole impromptu mixing of like the poison into the drink, and he ends up using too much of it, so he has to spread it out evenly, and he uses the vase.
Yeah, it's like don't drink it.
Mixing thing that the bartender would use.
Yeah.
Oh man.
It's just so many little details that add to the comedy.
Oh yeah.
Did you guys have any issues with it? Because mine are fairly minor.
I mean, most of the ones that I had were concerning like the production behind it and all the tumultuous things. But I can imagine that other films that Disney have done have been just as tumultuous, if not more so. We just haven't seen footage of that because they don't want you to see it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's just probably just part of the course. There might be some productions that go smoother than others, but for the most part, it is a lot of wrestling back and forth trying to figure out what this thing is we're doing. And all this time and effort and money we're putting into it, and it ends up being a battle between the end product and what how successful it's going to be. I guess they want to make their return on investment. So there's a lot of different ways of going about it. It was fun for me just to go back and re-experience it. I didn't think of anything too critical beyond that. I was just thinking of the implications of the production itself. But it's a fun time. I didn't find it super emotionally resonant as much this time experiencing it, but I still enjoyed myself. We're going to get into ratings. I'd give it a solid 6.9. It's just a good time for me.
Nice. What about you, Drew? Did you have any problems with it?
No, I'm properly like full bias on display. I really love this film. I'm a big fan of all the things that this movie has going for it. So if you aren't a fan of fourth wall breaking, irreverent humor, or self-referential styles of humor, then I can understand how someone might not enjoy this film. But for me, I loved all of this, and I really loved the way that the film carries itself, the way that it has. I mean, I won't. In case anyone hasn't seen it, the end of the film I really like, and I would definitely give this film at least a 7 out of 10.
Ooh,
nice.
My issues are very minor, and I think a large part of it is due to the fact that it was rushed. The low acts where like Kuzco has like the inevitable like argument with the friend, and he finds out the error of his ways and all of that. That lasts like 2 minutes, and because of the rush nature of the film, that has like no time to breathe, and it's like Pacha just finds him out of nowhere. It's like this could have been something, but they just completely rushed for it in a way I don't think was self-aware, and again was likely a side effect of the time, like the messy behind the scenes. Some of the animation is a bit janky, like I said, but most of it is, gorgeous and very unique. And the style definitely makes up for a lot. But it's the Emperor's New Groove. If you haven't seen this movie yet, what's wrong with you? It's one of Disney's funniest movies, and it's got a lot of heart to it, too. I'm going higher than you guys, 8 out of 10. It is a better satire of greed and corruption than RoboCop will ever be, and I'll stand by that fact.
Wow.
That is a review right there.
I should take that there.
I like that. I like that.
I'd buy that take for $1.
Yeah, but perhaps another time because I want to hear Aaron's thoughts on this film.
Ooh, yes.
For Emperor's New Groove?
Yes.
Well, I'm gonna have to lean between Ian's opinions and Drew's opinions. I love this movie, but I do see some flaws that Ian has mentioned with being rushed and all that, but I do love it, so I will give it a 8.5 out of 10.
Ooh, nice. It's also 78 minutes long. Like, holy crap, that's one of the shortest films I've seen in a while.
Yeah, I like that it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's just kind of brief, punchy, in your face, fun. I guess I just kind of feel bad that Sting got screwed over and a bunch of other people kind of got screwed over. So really, I guess part of that bias is just knowing the tumultuous production behind it, having seen the Sweatbox. And I can understand why Disney doesn't ever want to release that film, but I do think that
They should, at this point. Like, just rip off the Band-Aid. Like, everybody knows about it already.
Yeah, you know what? And I think after 20 years, the people that have watched it have grown up and they're reflecting on, this stuff. And I think it's good for any creative person to understand just what goes into these kind of projects and how important it is to have the concept kind of down solid going into it, just so everybody's on board at the same time and things connect more smoothly.
Exactly.
But then again, some of that challenging back and forth does add to the end result. And occasionally you get a rare end product like this movie where it's just this wacky, irreverent, but somehow still mimetically relevant movie that people will still take screen caps from and add captions to, and somehow it's still part of the cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah,
and with all its bizarre, terrifying absurdity, and it's hilarious. I was just the last scene that I saw before I switched the tapes around was Kronk trying to dispose of the body, and he's singing like he's singing like the Mission Impossible theme himself, or not quite the emotional, and it's like he freezes as people are walking by, and he's clearly oh man, that scene kills me.
Patrick Warburton improvised that scene, and not only that, Disney ordered him to copyright that theme song. Thanks, Disney, you're the best. Speaking of screw Disney, Atlantis, The Lost Empire. Devin.
Oh boy.
Ooh. So Atlantis, The Lost Empire was I think the next major film that Disney did after this. And this one has been a personal favorite of mine for some time. So the interesting thing about all these films, they came out sequentially. Emperor's New Groove was like a 3-year-long journey, but it came out in 2000. This came out in 2001. And just reading from the back of the VHS tape, because I have it here, from the creative team who brought you The Lion King and Beauty and the Beast comes the exciting quest and adventure and discovery. Join the expedition and search below the sea for one of the greatest mysteries of all time, Atlantis, the Lost Empire. Pause for effect. The world's most highly qualified crew of archaeologists and explorers are led by historian Milo Thatch as they board the incredible 1,000-foot submarine Ulysses and head deep into the mysteries of the sea. The underwater expedition takes an unexpected turn where the team's mission must switch from exploring Atlantis to protecting it. So I remember seeing this when it first came out, and this was such a tonally different, epic kind of feeling from Disney that I hadn't experienced before. It's the first time that I've heard another language used in a Disney film, and I believe they created their own language for it, like the Atlantean language.
Not only did they create the language, it was the same person who did the language for Vulcan and Klingon.
Wow, so they really did like their work to really create this fictional depiction of a myth of a vastly mythologized thing. It takes something from the real world and it just, what if we discovered it? What if it was real? And how do we imagine advanced civilization from thousands of years in the past where people live for like thousands, like just that I'm probably just biased with sci-fi, but I just love that concept. And I remember even making my own like journal based off of the one in this thing. I just took a journal and I drew that symbol on it, and I tried writing my own made up spin-offs of this kind of thing. So I really fell in love with this thing when it first came out. So I'm probably leaning into that bias, but I still just enjoy the concept and the visuals of this. There's a strong feeling that I get when I watch some of these things. I love the use of the blue lighting. Like that was a really nice aesthetic choice that I really resonated with. I do find, upon revisiting it, the pacing is a lot more choppy and brisky than I remember. It was probably good for my OCD ADHD brain as a kid, but as an adult, it does feel like it's being rushed a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Aside from that, I don't have too many complaints. I'm sure you'll love to highlight those in a minute here, Ian. But
Thanks.
I will close that this film does still have quite an impact on me watching it many years later. I just anytime I see just the blue waters in this thing, I have those chills. It gives me the same feelings as I did when I was younger. So at least aesthetics and vibes wise, it holds up for me.
Damn.
I very much want to echo that sentiment, actually, because I don't have a whole heck of a lot to comment right off the bat, but honest to goodness, this film, when I was a kid, I thought it was just fine. The pacing was just fine. But as an adult, I desperately wish this film was maybe even one whole hour longer. Just
At least.
full bias on display, you know? We will get into the actual story for full spoilers of, the characters just, tracking down Atlantis versus actually getting to Atlantis and then getting from Atlantis is really, really differently paced. I love the film has such a nice build up to actually going on this expedition. We really get to spend time with Michael J. Fox's character Milo Thatch, who we see him struggling and failing in life, and he thinks he's gonna go and he's gonna find Atlantis. He's a cartographer, right?
He's a linguist. He's a
linguist
linguist and a cartographer.
Yeah, so he's a map maker and a language learner, and he's gonna do it. It's gonna be great. And he meets, this eccentric millionaire who funds his expedition, and then they just sort of set off, and their journey to go to Atlantis and then find Atlantis, I felt was really quite compressed. Maybe you guys, share the same feeling, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, my issue is the whole film felt compressed. Even the start of the movie, it felt compressed. Like, it's like we go from Milo giving this lecture to the other people that ignore his offer at the museum. Then we go straight to his apartment. We don't even get like a chance to breathe. Like, we don't know what his apartment's like. We don't know what his relationship with his cat is like, or if he has any family outside of his grandpa. We're just going straight to like the other person's apartment, where I get confused sexual reactions to one of the characters.
Still today.
Yeah,
that hasn't changed.
Yeah, I know. Rip off the Band-Aid. Blondie was my first childhood crush, and she's still a very attractive, good example of a strong female character done properly. I stand by that fact.
That's not Blondie from Good, Bad, and the Ugly, mind you.
No, this is a very different gender Blondie than the other Blondie. But yeah, like the whole film felt really compressed to me, and there's a part where Milo was like, "Wait, go where? What's happening?" And I was like, "Yes, Milo, I feel the same way." But despite its issues, despite the admittedly many problems I have with it, this has always been like my ultimate Disney guilty pleasure. There's still so much I enjoy about it. It has a lot of heart to it, and despite the many issues I have, there's just as much about it I loved. It's a mess, but it's kind of a beautiful mess.
One of the things, thinking of beautiful mess, I commented in the last episode, or the last movie that was, I really liked the art style of Emperor's New Groove, and I absolutely adore the art style going on here in Atlantis. And I don't envy anyone who had to draw such artistically detailed characters. They're very specific style choices, the thickness and thinnesses of, say, characters' eyebrows, or the very detailed angular hairstyles that all of them have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember if this is true or not, but if I'm not mistaken, Mike Mignola of Hellboy fame actually helped contribute to the character designs.
Yes, he did. That is true.
Yeah.
I was actually going to mention that.
I could see that. I could see that similarity between them, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. I think for any major film animated production, they generally create like a production bible, or like a lookbook, or perhaps I forget what they call it. It's like they create a design philosophy
concept book.
Yeah, don't they create like a design philosophy behind like how the characters are supposed to be proportioned and what the style entails? That way, all the artists are on board.
Absolutely, they do. Yes, that's very correct. And you can actually find really well archived, just out there on the internet, all manner of production material, notes, character reference sheets from this movie, and they are beautiful to look at. They're really a lot to take in because some of these characters have so many intricate designs. Like
Mm.
rewatching this movie, the specific hairstyle they gave Princess Kita, her, she's got some flat edges and spiky edges and it moves. And the scene where the characters get into the water and their hair sort of floats and moves, and then when they get out of the water, it's saggy and heavy. I mean, for goodness sake, like, it's such small details, but
Yeah.
thinking of someone having to make pencil lines look like they have weight behind them is an art that ceaselessly inspires me.
Yeah, and all those details have to be hand drawn too. On top of that,
Hmm.
like I was reading, like the ending shot of the movie was almost entirely hand drawn animation. What they did was they took a piece of paper that was 1,500 feet long, combined up to 100 drawings on that huge piece of paper. Every single little ship had to be, well, most of the ships, some of them were CGI, I believe, but most of the ships had to be hand drawn into it. Milo and Mia had to be hand drawn with different animations in each frame. Even though they dropped the camera, they drawn like the different animations of the characters in each frame, and they stretched it out and they just panned the camera along those frames, and that's how they got like the ending shot of the movie. Like, it's insane. Like,
That's
again, there are like
incredible.
rough around the edges details. I could notice the lighting on the characters was weirdly off at times, but it's so minor. And the 3D elements and the canvas painting elements, like this movie has its own ballroom shot. Like this is from the directors behind Beauty and the Beast, which I always meme because they're just vastly different movies. There's a ballroom shot where it's like panning around like the submarine, but it goes around like the glass of the submarine. You can see all of the characters behaving and acting in there while the camera is still moving, and it's just like, how did you pull that off? Like, that is gorgeous.
It really does feel like the artists here were determined to try and do their best to push 2D animation to some of its absolute extremes.
Absolutely. And you mentioned like the side characters, like they are memed for a reason. Like they're stereotypical, yes they're a little bit one dimensional, but they're just so entertaining and colorful. And like the scene with Mole, who was voiced by Frollo from Hunchback, which I just noticed. I was like, what? And it's like, you're distracted, dude. And it's like, you know everything about this little guy just from his like silly interaction. It's not just like a silly interaction, it actually builds character in a really fun way. And I say that because this may be controversial, I really don't like Milo Fadge in this movie. I really don't think
Mm.
he's an interesting protagonist at all, and I think the rush nature really like blows anything, like any kind of emotional attachment to him. Like the relationship he has with Kita is established so quickly and so frivolously that you just feel nothing for them. And it's like, why should I care that he goes to save Mia towards the end of the movie? Like, why should I care that they're finally together? Like, the film didn't earn that payoff. And I feel like his character suffered the most from the pacing issues, and he's the main character.
It, oh man,
I mean, I think he's meant to be kind of just a blank slate character that you're supposed to put
Yeah.
yourself into, more or less. You know, you could argue the same thing about Neo in The Matrix. He's just meant to be this this. It's not a self-insert character. He's meant to be kind of the character that you're like an avatar in. Which, by the way, I think this film does Avatar better than Avatar did.
Oh,
like
I agree with
8
that.
years later, whenever that came out, I think it did. I think its commentary is a little more poignant, or at least it stands up a bit better. It's a weird mix of a lot of classic kind of adventure films of the last century. It's a mix of like A Thousand Leagues Under the Sea meets the Pocahontas meets The Abyss, and there's another one that maybe Journey to the Center of the Earth. It's kind of a combination of all those
25 Leagues Beyond the Sea. It kind of gave me vibes of those like old Disney adventure movies, but it's the blank slate nature of his character, but it's also just I really hate the like like Coke bottle glasses nice guy character trope so much in cinema, where it's like, oh, the clumsy nerd was like, oh, whoops, I dropped my map. Oh, whoops, tee hee, I'm so clumsy, I'm gonna bump into this box and drop a dynamite. But like eventually becomes a man and becomes hardened by his adventure. Like that character trope just drives me nuts so much. The only movie that can get away with that character arc is LA Confidential, and even they're pushing it.
I still, though, I do maintain one of my favorite character moments for Milo is when he just loses his crap at Commander Rook, who, there's such a good scene. This is just full spoilers. There's a scene where the protagonist of the film, voiced by Michael J. Fox, just does such a brilliant job of the protagonist learns that they've been tricked, that they've only gone to Atlantis to pilfer it for resources, not for the betterment of scientific advancement and the good of the world.
Mm-hmm.
They're here to pilfer the city, take the resources, they're here to make money and maybe even, get weapons if they can. And the good-natured linguist and cartographer, Milo, he's such a timid nerd, and he loses his mind at the military commander in charge of this journey. It's just such a good scene where they've animated him freaking out and shouting and throwing his hands everywhere, and you really get to see him just the thin veneer of trying to be a professional, respectable, timid guy just boils out in this explosion of rage.
I agree that's a good scene, and it's a good, like, well-acted scene, but it just, I guess my problem is that it just didn't really feel earned. And again, probably in a longer movie that's got established this character a lot better, but this movie just has such low runtime, it has to go by so quick and introduce so many characters that it just kind of leaves like some of the emotional value behind in the dust. And I think
it
there's
leaves something to be desired, I suppose.
Exactly, and there was a tagline they used for this movie and many others, including Treasure Planet, which has this issue, but nowhere near as much, in my opinion, where it's like less songs, more explosions, and kind of like this go, go, go kind of pacing. Like we gotta give the audience like a sense of adrenaline and keep things moving. But it's like you said with the Dirt Devon, where they're like, nah, we're gonna skip that scene in the hospital run. You're like, no, that's the character development. And I'm like,
oh, yeah.
there were so many scenes where I was just feeling that way. It's like, all right, we're going off in the exposition. It's like, no, talk a little bit more. I need a little bit more of this. Like,
in the Dirt, that was about Motley Crue, and they decided to not tell any of their any of the story of what happened in rehab. And I'm like, that's where I think the more vulnerable character moments are. I can understand why them as living people wouldn't want to put that out there, but that's where I would actually like connect to you as people, perhaps. Like there just seems like a missing opportunity there, because they just wanted the fun sex, drugs, rock and roll stuff, and this film feels that urgency of adventure and turning on. And I'm watching the film on fast forward right now just as we're talking, and as he's going down under the water with Kira and discovering the mysteries of Atlantis, he comes up and then suddenly everybody's turned on him. I mean, that's such kind of a whiplash moment in retrospect. It worked for me as a kid, and I think if I didn't fall in love with this and watch it so many times as a kid, I probably, would feel that same thing. But there is this, sense of urgency and things kind of turning, just turning on him kind of really quickly, almost out of nowhere. Or I guess they were just waiting for an opportune moment for that to happen. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's fair. And I ain't being too harsh to this film. Like, there was a lot to appreciate as well. The music is absolutely wonderful. Like, remember when James Newton Howard gave a shit? Like, with The Sixth Sense, The Village, which was a shitty movie, but the music was great. This, Treasure Planet, like, he used to pour so much more heart and passion than he does now in this movie scores, and it just makes me so sad listening to this music score again and seeing what he would become. And on top of that, like I mentioned, the side characters were really entertaining. Almost every line Vinny said just made me laugh so hard. My mom's like, what's so funny? I'm like, oh, come on, screw you, this is hilarious. So he's like, we used to do like petty crimes and stealing from graves. Nobody got hurt. I mean, somebody got hurt, but nobody we knew. Like, that was like hilarious. Even though it does kind of have that problem of kind of ruining a dramatic scene a little bit here, but it was still absolutely hysterical. And the voice cast is great. All three films have a fantastic voice cast, and this one especially nails its casting with even like the smallest characters. And again, like the actor who played Frollo voicing Mole, like two completely different roles, but he somehow manages to knock it out of the park, even though it's like a dumb comedic side character. He just pours his heart and soul into it. There's not, I'd say from like a technical standpoint, a voice acting standpoint, and a humor standpoint, it's great, but there's so much about like the emotional connection with the film that made me feel lacking, which, you know, may be like, hey, it's a Disney movie, you're being too harsh on it. Well, we just talked about The Emperor's New Groove, and that had a character arc I could really connect with. And that movie is more of a dumb mimic comedy than this movie is.
This film is a lot more serious in its tone,
Mhm.
and whether it earns that dramatic seriousness is up for debate, obviously. The one scene that I think is at the heart of this film, no pun intended, is when she, becomes the heart of Atlantis, when she goes into that underground cavern and she kind of gets absorbed in this plasma ball of all the souls of the ancient Atlanteans.
Yes.
Something about that just still mystifies me. It's such a beautiful sequence, and I feel like the whole film was maybe written around to get to that moment.
Yeah.
And maybe they kind of maybe they kind of skipped ahead to get to that point. But I do think that moment still, there's just something so mystifying about it. It kind of reminds me of Evangelion a little bit, the end of it. I'm not going to spoil anything in that for anyone that... I wonder if this was somewhat inspired by that. It says, that's a cool kind of vibe or setup. Can we do that without all the horrific stuff that happens before?
Yeah, all of the depression. No depression, please. I feel like that scene, the scene with the Leviathan and the scene with the blimp, are like the money shot moments. Like that's what see Atlantis for. But my problem is like that happens like at the beginning, at the middle, and at the end, and every in between is just kind of meandering. Like it feels like rushes by just to get to those moments. But those moments are admittedly pretty cool. And the animation in like the final like the climactic battle is fantastic. My friend Matt pointed out they animated not only bullets but bullet curvatures. Like accurate bullet curvatures when you're firing like 50 feet in the air. And again, like the attention to detail is just insane for a movie that has a 48 Metascore on Metacritic.
That was also something that like it was very rare for Disney to depict actual guns that weren't fictionalized guns in some sense. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember any.
Yeah, like Blondie straight up has a Mauser, like a pretty accurate Mauser and a flare gun, which is like period accurate.
And the only other film that I can think of doing that around this time was The Iron Giant, and that wasn't even Disney. That was
Warner Bros.
Brad.
Technically, it's Disney.
Brad Bird has worked for Disney, worked for them, so there's some crossbreeding there. But real guns in a Disney movie when you're 6 years old really ups the ante. Like, oh, this is for real. This it really ups the stakes. It's not just like plasma laser pistols where it's just beams of light and the guy just kind of falls over and he wasn't even shot. It's like, oh, these are real.
Well, and I gotta tell you, like on that note, honest to goodness, I think that the fact that this is a Disney movie is honestly probably one of its own biggest hindrances, because if they could make this movie for, instead of the younger audience that it was marketed to, but instead for an older teen audience, and you could have maybe one or two curse words in it, and you could have a longer runtime.
One well-placed fuck would have made this movie perfect.
Oh god.
I would love to, all of the gripes I have with this movie come down to my own things that I want more from this film. It's not that I think that this movie should have things removed from it, but rather I want more of it, a longer runtime to explore. I want to see more of the culture, more of the people, more of the monsters, more of the exploring.
Like I could see this being a 2.5 hour live action epic, and it could be good if it's handled right, or I don't know. It's hard to say. There's so many films that have become readapted as live action that haven't felt necessary. This is one that people would like, but it has to be done well for it to really earn it.
Yeah.
Although that hasn't stopped people from associating real people to who they would cast as characters. You might see in the live feedback channel I posted this one where Milo Thatcher is James Franco.
No, come on.
And they have freaking
Danny DeVito. I like. That's the only one I like out of that.
Danny DeVito
That's perfect.
The general from Avatar would be the guy in this. That's probably a given. I mean, I can see it. It's just fun to see people associating or coming up with like fictional live action castings for animated films. Just they see that the concept could be brought to life in another realm or another dimension
Mm.
When
from 2D
I
to 3D.
when I think of the pacing in this film, I actually more closely think of a tabletop role-playing game. You know,
Mm.
you've got your really strong premise and your characters play along, and some encounters are rushed and some encounters are slow, and then you sort of wrap things up with a big climactic set piece. And, you know, I think it works very well cinematically and full bias on display. I think that this is actually, it's one of my favorite Disney movies. I think that this would make a great like tabletop role playing game or a scenario for say a
Oh
Call of Cthulhu
yeah,
campaign or something.
100%. I could see this
Call of
being like
Cthulhu would be amazing for this.
oh yeah, like I haven't played D&D just because I never have time to, but I've been more than interested in people have been trying to get me involved. But I could see a D&D thing being based on this possibly, and taking some of the parental restrictions off to really push some of the themes. Um,
I have
and
never. Sorry.
one thing I was going to point out though, one character or one performance I think is overlooked. I love Leonard Nimoy as Kira's father
Yes.
in this. Like his presence in this is like he has some sage words. He's trying to protect his people's culture, although he's kind of stuck in these certain ways. But he was kind of right all along at the same time.
Yeah. His
um,
voice was just perfect, but I do have to
oh
point out
yeah,
one really dumb thing his character does, where it's the whole, all right, you can stay for one night trope. And I'm like, no, you pointed out that they have guns, you pointed out that they're dangerous, and you don't trust them. Why don't you just kick them out? Why are you keeping them around for an entire night? Sure. Oh, okay, great, good job. You keep them around for 24 hours when they have loaded guns and ill intent. Awesome.
yeah. I mean,
His
it's kind of hard to say because their argument was we need time to recuperate so that we have time to hack and whatnot. But
I need to
or
I
or
need to
at least run
quickly
a coup. Sorry, go
oh
ahead.
my no, it's fine. I need to quickly comment on this is again just me being an animator who watched this film and quietly cried to myself when you have to realize that to make Leonard Nimoy's character, the King of Atlantis, move, he has tattoos on all of his exposed body parts,
That's
especially
true.
his face. When he moves his head, my God, the tattoos have to move with him. And you're like, oh, yeah, of course the tattoos move. And then you think, oh, I have to draw that maybe even 24 times for one frame of this stupid old man delivering his dialogue. And
Wow.
you cry on the inside because somewhere out there are some animators still recovering from the trauma of having to make sure those tattoos stay where they should on his face. This they might have been able to use some early 3D to give them an impression of where things were, or probably more likely a plaster and clay character maquette of the person's face just so that
Yep.
they could tilt it and look where the tattoos would be. But at the end of the day, you still have to draw that on paper, one stupid drawing at a time. And if they don't track, then it looks wrong and you gotta do it again. And I looked at
Man.
this. I applaud whoever worked on The King of Atlantis because seriously, I I cry thinking of all that work.
That's
That's something I
yeah.
would overlook too. Like I wouldn't realize how much work that would be to create, but now that I think about it, yeah, like an element like that has to change on dimension and look right on a person's skin. Like, yeah, that's got to be very tricky. It's one of those details that you would kind of overlook, but it's worth noticing and appreciating just how much work gets involved in creating little details like that. And all the Atlanteans have tattoos in some sense, like whether it's just a little facial feature or something on their arm, they all have little tattoos. And I'm actually looking at some of the background characters and seeing if I'm noticing any weird like shifts in the tattoos, because I imagine for the background characters they probably didn't have as much attention put on them, or if they're featured somewhere in the background, then who's looking over there? Like, you just have to get the shot done right by a certain time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I'm going to start looking for, to see if there's any weird looking tattoo shifts. Not to mention, they all glow. They all have this blooming effect, or at least to some extent. It depends on the lighting, but I really love the blooming effects that they create in this. And I don't know if they just have a more transparent paint that they use, and the light of the light box just shines through to create that real light leak. I'm pretty sure they use that all over Evangelion as well, where maybe they paint, or maybe they don't paint certain parts of the cells to let the actual light shine through, and you have this realistic halation of light in your animation. And I love kind of that practical technique to bring some of the real world's physics into your animated worlds, by having real light sources be a part of it. Or maybe I'm full of shit. I don't know. I haven't studied this. I'm just going off of
No.
gut instincts of how I think these things are done.
Well, your one comment though, I thought was actually like perfectly spot on, where these are details that you can overlook, and I think that's actually an enormous compliment, because of course the tattoos on the King of Atlantis' face just track wherever he moves, because of course that's just who he is, and you don't realize when you forget that those horrible details need to be done so meticulously, and they just blend into the scene. That's when the artists have done the best job.
Absolutely.
Especially if they're so. A film like this, is everything animated on ones, or are some elements animated on twos? If you don't know what I'm talking about, this is a term in animation where if they draw a picture, every single picture for 24 frames, or with some elements and some things, they can get away with doing half by just animating on twos, and there's only 12 frames per second. Is there a mixture, or is everything pretty well uniform animated on ones?
Oh, I'm going to be entirely transparent. There will be plenty of mixture here. If you can get away with drawing something on twos with only 12 frames a second, you will do so. There are plenty of slower talking scenes where the characters don't really need to go fast. That'll be on twos. Some of the scenes, though, where the characters have really dynamic camera motion or camera panning, those actually are on ones, and they are remarkable because of it.
Mm-hmm. And imagine some elements even just look better animated on twos if they're supposed to be maybe more of a smooth motion to them, or which you think you'd want more images for it to be smoother, but sometimes the differences become more erratic. I was looking into the 12 concepts of principles of animation, and that was really enlightening to find that out, that sometimes things look more erratic if they're animated on ones, which works perfectly for like water and fire elements, which this is full of. And I know you're an expert in this, Drew. This is literally what your job has been, right? Like animating fire and water.
Absolutely, yes. And that's the exact principle that I've actually put to use on a few different moments of, when I'm drawing, because I do still draw for my job, even though I'm on the computer, I draw with a tablet pen by hand.
Mm-hmm.
So because my hand-drawn lines have some organic inconsistencies, I can actually lean into that. There's some great scenes of fire where, I can draw things 24 frames a second, and that little bit of pencil wiggle can, bring an otherwise relatively, how should I put it, a stiff or an otherwise mechanically clean effect, and give it a much more organic feel.
It just brings it to life, for sure. And I think it works in your favor when you can take those imperfections and make them work in your favor, because fire is supposed to be this erratic natural force that, and only in some situations do we have much control over. So it definitely works, especially if you want the fire to look dangerous. Then you could probably be a little careless when putting that together, just to make it look even more violent.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
There's some.
And I do.
Sorry, go
Yeah.
on.
No, it's fine. What was that?
There's some behind-the-scenes stuff I'd like to mention with this movie. It flopped. Unfortunately, Emperor's New Groove wasn't a flop, but didn't make quite as much as they were hoping for. This movie was a flop. I think it lost about $10-15 million at the box office. But furthermore, this movie was originally going to be a TV series on the Disney Channel, which I think would have been great. But because the movie was so unsuccessful at the box office, they instead just took like a few of the ideas they had for a TV show and stuffed into an awful straight-to-DVD sequel called Atlantis: Milo's Return, which By the way, if you want the Blu-ray for Atlantis: The Lost Empire, you have to get it included with Milo's Return. There is no option just to get Atlantis: The Lost Empire.
Oh man.
So that was just
You know
something
what?
neat I wanted to point out.
This is a weird memory I have. So I don't know if you guys know Zayre's, like the grocery store. At some point in time, they had like an electronics section. And I remember they had like TVs out where they would be previewing whatever new movies that they had there, and they had like the sequel to Atlantis, and I was waiting for my parents to finish shopping, and I was just watching it in the store on that TV, and thinking, I don't know if I want this one. It doesn't look like it's holding up to the next, but maybe my views will change a little bit just if it's any more absurd. I've actually noticed this on the previews for these movies, watching them back. They were advertising so many sequels to like Hunchback of Notre Dame and Lion King 2 and something else. And it's like all these sequels that I completely forgot about or didn't realize exist because they went straight to video. And yeah, it's just funny to see how the marketing was at that point and how they would, spin these things like, hey, we're making a movie with less budget that probably isn't going to make a return. It's going to go straight to video. But how cool is that? Like they try to spin it as positive as they can. And when you're younger, you don't understand what any of that is, and so it just kind of seems interesting. But looking at it as adult, you can see right through the veil of the marketing of how they're trying to spin this as positively as they can to try to make what return they have for that project. Because there was a lot of sequels coming out for these movies that were going direct to video.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Emperor's New
I'll
Groove
tell
had
you.
one too. Kronk's New Groove.
Yes,
It's such a good movie.
I remember that one. Sorry, Drew, you were saying.
No, it's fine. I had a joke about, Call of Cthulhu tabletop games earlier, but honest to goodness, the Milo's Return, being essentially the first 3 episodes of what would have been a TV series, just sort of weekly linked together into one theatrical release DVD film. Man, I gotta tell you that those scenarios where they go to, I actually like that one where they go to the coast and they see a sea monster in a coast and like ghosts in a canyon.
Yeah.
Those would be pretty decent Call of Cthulhu tabletop
Yeah,
campaigns.
I feel like even the main adventure, like if you spun it with like an alien twist and focused on like the Leviathan creatures and more on that, like that was affecting Atlantis in some way, that would be a perfect Call of Cthulhu adventure. I might just have to steal that idea sometime. Thanks, Drew. As a
No
DM
worries,
myself, that idea is just too good to be true.
I am curious actually to check it out because I probably thought positively of it when I was in that store. I probably only had the negative thought because my mom looked at the sticker, probably said $25 and says, "You're not getting that." Like, just price is too high. Get it like 20 years later
Get
when
your own.
just remembered it exists and you can find it for $1 somewhere. It's it's probably better in the long run.
Sure.
Because I'll have more of a foundation to appreciate it, I suppose. Yeah, it's crazy how expensive VHS tapes were back in the day. Like we see them nowadays as like these obsolete, nostalgic, video format. But back then it was a full price movie, like $25 to get these clamshell tapes. They actually go for even more on eBay these days. If you have a mint condition Disney movie, those clamshell things are super collectible. Like they sell for crazy
Ridiculous
numbers.
prices. Well, anything does after a long period of time. Like it just builds up nostalgic value, and people love stuff that's not tarnished over time. And like stuff like Super Smash Bros. Melee, for example, is over $100. You could get like an unopened, sealed copy of Super Smash Bros. Melee for over $100. Like it's insane. Like it's such like an old, like classic, but very old. Like kind of dated fighting game. Like it's held up so well in the competitive fighting community, and I think that's why it's so worth so much on its own. And that just all of those little details add so much value to something over time. But only time will tell, like how much something is worth. And thank you, Aaron, for stopping by. He subbed in with his thoughts a couple of times. Thank you for stopping by. Sorry it took so long to get to you. Final thoughts on Atlantis, The Lost Empire.
I was pretty scattered throughout this, so I'll try and do my best to collect my thoughts.
No, you were good, man.
I think that Atlantis is one of the most story and style original films Disney has ever attempted. The characters, I thought, could have memorable moments, and the ones that are memorable, in my opinion, are very memorable. I loved the story and wished there was a lot more of it, and I would absolutely give this film an 8.5 out of 10.
Ooh,
What about you,
very
Devin?
nice. I mean, this was a nice comeback for me. Even though there's some issues with pacing, I still felt a lot of the same things that I felt when I was younger, and it was quite refreshing to come back to this. And I mean, I think I just still have a crush on Kira, so that's probably it. No, I give this movie an 8. It's it's a fun movie. I love it. It's sadly underrated because of how poorly it did. I don't know why it only holds a 47. The main issue that I've seen on Rotten Tomatoes is the pacing, but that's like a small thing for me. I guess personally, I would give it an 8. Objectively, maybe a 6.9 just for the meme. But I love the atmosphere and I love the immaculate detail, and it's a classic kind of adventure story that just has a really cool concept at its heart for me. And I love the idea of an ancient civilization that's so advanced in its technology and rediscovering that and connecting to it in modern civilization. I think I just love that concept.
Yeah. Fortunately, I didn't quite like it as much as you guys. Loved the animation and the music, especially the music, and a lot of the character beats and comedy bits. And there was some details about like the darker themes that explore like valuing like money over science and exploring different cultures for their belongings and to put it in a museum, which this film handled that way better than Black Panther. Just putting that out there, but I just think the heart of this film is so lacking. I really hate the main character. I can't stress how much I hate him. I really don't know why. He's not particularly offensive or terrible, but it's just something about how they handle his character arc that drives me nuts. And emotionally, I don't know, compared to the other two films, this film left me cold. And we're comparing that to a film about a llama, so take that as you will. But, you know,
Weird.
it's still a guilty pleasure, so I give it a
I
6.5, 6.9 out of 10.
Nice.
I was just gonna say I was gonna quote Quan saying, "Yeah, weird."
No, I was gonna
It's a fun movie.
quote Mole
I
say.
mean,
I thought you were
I
gonna
guess
quote
I
Mole
should-
saying, "This is an outrage! You need to get out!" Out.
I guess I shouldn't be too off-put that it left it cold. It is a very cool color palette. I mean, the whole thing's just saturated in blues. But I don't know. For me, blue is the warmest color, I guess.
You suck. We have one last film to talk about. A little movie called Treasure Planet. Treasure Planet has been a huge part of my childhood for so many reasons. It was the first film I saw in the 70mm IMAX screening when I was just 6 years old. It got me into the book it was originally based off of, Treasure Island. And it showed me that Disney films could be like so much more than just like musical cascade of Disney princesses and cute animals. Well, it does have a cute animal, or alien, I guess, but anyways.
Whatever morph counts as.
And a tale where the young and edgy Jim Hawkins comes across a dying pirate who, on his last dying breath, much like in the book, offers up a chest containing a map towards the infamous Treasure Planet, which was not in the book, but now everything has been up to sci-fi in this adaptation, which a lot of critics were pissed at for some reason, and we'll get into that, but this leads to his mother's restaurant getting burned down by other pirates who are also searching for the map. So Jim decides to join up with Dr. Doppler to wrangle up a crew and hunt down the Treasure Planet for fame and fortune, and also to help his mother out who just lost her restaurant. And this is where Jim comes across John Silver, who he forms a bit of a fatherly bond with, only to find out that he's got a nasty little secret of his own. And that's Treasure Planet. And, maybe part of this is the nostalgia talking, but I still think a lot of this film holds up so well. I think it's easily the best out of the three films we're talking about. It has its issues. Yes, some of the CGI is aged pretty horribly, and Martin Short legitimately ruins parts of this movie like he does in most movies, but, the soundtrack, the cast, like the heart of the film with the relationship between Jim and John just like holds up so well in my eyes and ties this film together. And I have a theory that I'm a firm believer on, that Disney deliberately sabotaged that film. But enough about me. What do you guys think?
Oh,
Well, this
man.
is a movie that I really liked when it first came out. It's weird that I know the marketing of it. They only had like the one trailer for it before it released, but I remember me just seeing that one trailer and I think it was the shot of them approaching the space station, which looks like a crescent moon. Um, and that just really captured my imagination. Like, wow, this is like Disney going to space, and this is like, Disney trying to do Star Wars, which incidentally they would become Star Wars later on, or they'd buy Star Wars later on. Also, watching that scene as an adult, so it really inspired me as a kid, and I wanted to go see this. I don't remember seeing it in the theater, but I'm so jealous that you got to see it in IMAX.
Mm-hmm.
I know I for sure, got it on tape and saw it on TV many times since. I think I did go see it in the theater. I would have loved to anyway, because it was such a phenomenal film. But I can imagine when they saw that crescent moon turn into a space station, someone at DreamWorks was like, "Oh, fuck you."
Yeah, it's such a breathtaking moment, and like the transition from like the normal conversation to panning into the moon, because you're like, wait a minute, why are they showing the crescent moon for so long? They transition into it. You're like, holy crap!
That's
Like
no
that's
moon.
the
It's
space
a space
station.
station.
Like that's such a breathtaking shot. Stated
And
CGI
and,
aside.
it rips right from DreamWorks' main logo at the time. Of,
You
so
think they did
I
on
imagine,
purpose?
I wonder what DreamWorks came up with after seeing this film, and I wonder if there was any subtle jabs in it for doing that shot. I'd imagine there's some rivalry there. I don't know. That's just me.
That's true.
And I'm trying to make up drama for my own amusement. But I really like this film. Going back into it, there's lots of fun things. I like. Oh man, what the main captain? What was her name?
Oh,
I really
Captain
like
Amelia.
her.
Yes.
Amelia. She's great. I like. All of her expressions are so cat-like.
Yeah,
And
and again with the unique character designs. Like the character designs are
mhm.
so unique. Like all of the crew members, like the guy who is like, "What are you looking at, weirdo?" and his head like effortlessly comes off, and there's like another more eyes on his body. Mr. Scroop is so like creepy looking, and he's got like the mutton chops, but he's also like this weird red scorpion. Like all of the characters are so fleshed out and detailed and unique. And all of the like hand drawn and canvas paint elements, the canvas paint elements especially, are like breathtaking. Like every time he's on the windsurfer and he's going through like the abandoned mill at the start of the movie, like that sequence is, sure, it's jerking off the animation a little bit, but I feel like they kind of earned it in scenes like that. And
Not
They,
only
they,
did
they
they
do
earn
such a
it,
good. They do such a good job blending the 3D and the 2D. Even though the 3D kind of dates itself, they did, I think, as good of a job as they could then
yeah, it's
to.
very inspired.
Yeah, like you can tell the exact same style was applied to both things, so that they felt like they belonged together in the same frame. And it was well implemented. I think the 2D and the 3D animation.
For sure, for sure. And so Captain Amelia was originally like a man in the books. I forget the original captain's name, but like their relationship with the Doctor was like, it wasn't like super in depth, but it was kind of sweet. Like there was kind of an arc to it, and the joke of a cat falling in love with a dog is like, I see what you did there, Disney. Like it was
Yeah.
very sweet, but like the main heart of this movie and what really draws it together, and is something I personally think is better handled than the original book, is that father-son relationship with Long John Silver. Like the montage where "I'm Still Here" plays in the background is so, could have been really cheesy, but so beautifully and elegantly handled that I'll say it. I get a little teared up every time I see that sequence. Like it relates a lot to
Okay,
my own experiences. On top of that,
no joke. Second you said that sequence, it literally came up. I'm as we're talking, I just put the tapes on and I'm watching it and fast forward just so the images are flashing as we're talking. But literally that sequence came up the second you said it, and it is a good sequence.
yeah,
Um,
it's all visually done. There's no dialogue during that. Well, there's very minimal dialogue during that sequence, and it only uses the sound when he turns on the windsurfer, and it's so incredibly well done. And the ending too is completely visual. It's all based on just music and sound and image to tell a story and wrap up so many character arcs so well. It wraps up all those character arcs and few minutes better than the entire last episode of Game of Thrones. So I'm just gonna let that sit in.
There is something that this film does that another film from this time period also does, is they look over some glaring facts about the physics in space, the fact that there is no air, which they also did in Jimmy Neutron. But I do still think it works well in the context of this, this movie geared
Yeah,
towards
and
kids.
you don't even notice it. Like the first time I watched it, it's like,
It kind of just makes it surrealist, which I quite enjoy. It's like a Dali painting, sort of, where they're able to breathe like normal atmosphere in space, which if you're someone on Earth and you're from that time period where piracy's a thing, it's like, what if there were ships out in the stars? You know, you wouldn't know about the difference in atmosphere and all this. So I can look over the fact that the black hole doesn't look like that just because it's beautiful, and it creates this nice dreamlike state. It feels very dreamlike, and
that's a good
I
way of
quite
putting it.
enjoyed that.
Yeah.
There is one 3D shot that stands out when he's going into the deck underneath, and it's like a perspective shot. It's kind of a cool shot, but that one did stick out as this is clearly 3D.
Yeah, I think the whales look the most dated to me. I was just like, oh
True.
god, that looks like shit. Like so much of this movie is beautiful, and that we have that to stain the overall imagery of the movie. Like, come on, we went from a breathtaking shot to the space station to that. Come on.
So there's another thing you pointed out earlier. So his father-like kind of relationship that he has with who turns out to be the bad guy in the movie.
Yeah. Or is
I
he?
guess and that's the thing here. There's a change of heart kind of partway through that was up for it. But the guy still, is a pirate who's committed many crimes and that he has answered to. And I had this disturbing thought that I couldn't let go of once I had it. And I'm just going to share it with you so I don't have to carry the burden of this myself.
Go on.
But just thinking about like the history of piracy and all the deplorable things they did, it made me wonder if their relationship couldn't be read as grooming. Just think about it. It's
okay.
I don't want to linger on this too long, but once you look at it like that, it's like.
I guess if you look at it a certain way. Let's change the subject. Drew, you're
Yeah,
awfully quiet.
Let's not linger on that.
You were awfully quiet, Drew. What are your thoughts on Treasure Planet?
No, I was having a great time listening to you guys just absolutely go off, because this movie actually also has a lot of history with me as well. So you might really get a kick out of this, Ian. When I saw this movie way back in 2002, not only did I not like it, I didn't like this movie a lot. This was my least favorite Disney movie, and it was wasted on me as a child.
Versus like Home on the Range?
So, well, okay, the Disney movies I actually saw.
Alright, fair enough.
Fair enough.
But so I watched Disney. I watched Treasure Planet maybe 10 years after this, in around 2012, and I remember vividly just kicking myself because I guess as a kid I sort of wrote it off. I thought the emotions were maybe too heavy for me as a child, because as a teenager I watched this film. I felt this sorrow, the loneliness that Jim felt when he saw his father leave, the bonding that he has when he finally finds a father figure, and bravo to this movie for having such a morally ambiguous cast of characters. Some are virtuous. John Silver is, I mean, for goodness sake, the fights they get into aren't just casual. He's got a knife in his arm, for goodness sake. So rewatching this film, I couldn't believe how callously I had just written it off as a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, I've done that with some other Disney movies Home on the Range is probably one of them. I don't imagine I'd lean much on revisiting that one. But even just a moment ago, like the sequel to Atlantis, I probably wrote off, even though I might have been initially interested. And then my, general cynicism for most Disney sequels, they were direct-to-video, just cash cows. I mean, that's just a broad-stroke cynical attitude. There's probably some merits in why those sequels were made. There was probably some idea that someone in the writer's room had, like, but what if we did this with this character, and wouldn't that be a cool resolve for what this person goes on to do? Like, there's got to be more of a reason beside we want to make money from this property to make a sequel. So, having revisited some of these, I am kind of interested in maybe looking at some of the other lowly Disney movies that didn't do so well and see what merits warranted. Are there any that are just generally overlooked? I think this film was maybe Disney's response to Titan AE, if anyone remembers that movie.
Yeah.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
absolutely. That very heavy Titan A vibes, and like from like the style of the film to like the use of rock music. But I'm gonna say right off the bat, this film makes much better use of rock music. Most of the rock music
Yeah.
in Titan AE shows up out of nowhere, and it's literally just explained the plot. Where the songs in this kind of do that too, but it's more so exploring the themes and what the characters are feeling, and more so than just "It's my time to fly, I gotta save the human race," like that terrible like
Even just the
song
color
in Titan
palette, like the
AE.
heavy use of orange, like is one thing. Like this film is filled with orange and like a magenta kind of
Mhm.
purple and blue. It's that's kind of the general color palette of this film, and yeah, it's kind of a beautiful looking movie that I don't think Disney has really replicated since.
Well, it's the hand-drawn animation again, like all of the detail and all of the characters' like hair and like only like Launch on Silver, like the only part of him was CGI. I thought his arm was CGI. No, only his eye. His arm was actually completely like canvas painting combined with hand-drawn animation. And like the amount of detail you'd have to put into that alone, like the scenes where he's like cutting all of the different vegetables and putting it into the soup is like animation magic. And it's just such a simple scene, but there's something indescribable about the beauty behind it. And going past that, I think I have to break the. I mentioned this with Drew earlier. I think Disney deliberately sabotaged this movie because while that trailer you mentioned going into the star part was great, there was also a lot of terrible marketing for this film. Like a lot of there was like one of two trailers that showed up like more than that trailer you saw. One of them was like him surfboarding, so people would be like, "All right, what's this film about?" Like, I don't know what this film is about. It's just about kids surfboarding. Who wants to watch that? Or it will spoil, like Tokyo Godfathers, major plot points. It spoils Captain Silver turning evil. It spoils Morph choosing Jim Hawkins over Captain Silver. Like, it spoils all these major plot points that are like, okay, I don't need to see the movie anymore. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, that's something that studios generally do for movies that they don't think they're going to make the return on. They just let's put
Yeah.
all the stuff in the trailers so people who are desperate to see it will see it, and we'll get whatever we can glean from it. So generally, yeah, trailers that give away too much plot points,
Mhm.
are the studio saying we don't have a lot of faith in this. Please go see it. Please spend money to go see this. It was also
Exactly.
weird. This actually struck me as a thing when we were looking back at Lord of the Rings, because I hadn't seen Lord of the Rings for the longest time. And when I looked at the trailers for the Twin Towers, I was surprised that they revealed that Gandalf was coming back. Like that was a major cliffhanger, a major thing from the last film
Yeah.
that you'd think that they would want to tease some more, but
Nope.
I guess it gives people a little more hope maybe going in. I don't know. But,
And something
it,
else I want to mention. This movie was released not the same month, not the same year, the same day as the first Harry Potter and Spirited Away. Like, what the
wow.
fuck? How did Disney think this film was going to stand up to that? And again, I think it's because Disney secretly wants to go into 3D animation, so they wanted this film to bomb. Why else would they market it like shit? Why else would they put this up
Well,
against a beloved children's novelization and what would become one of the highest grossing animes in the West until I believe Your Name took it over? Like, it's
I don't know. I don't know
so
if
clear to
wanting
me.
it to bomb it would be correct, but like hoping it does, hoping it does as well when they have little faith in it. I don't know. It sounds like stacked competition for sure. It's actually I thought wait, when did this come out? 2001 or 2002?
2002.
I thought Harry Potter came out in 2001.
No, Harry
Okay.
Potter came out. Or was it the Chamber of Secrets it was up against?
Probably.
I mean,
Oh, it was the Chamber of Secrets. So not only
That-
was it
that
based off a
sounds right.
novelization, it's a sequel to an incredibly successful first movie.
I mean, it's not like Chamber of Secrets made almost $1 billion at the box
Yeah,
office
and it's
or
not like
anything.
Spirited Away made tons of money. Like, what were they thinking. It's so bad. And this movie.
Didn't,
Go on.
wait, it was that Spirited Away coming out in Japan or over here?
I think it was over here. I think I could be wrong.
Okay, so it wasn't Disney behind dubbing the dub of that?
Spirited Away. Yes, they were.
So I guess in some sense they were competing against themselves, and they were just hoping that this movie gains traction, but releasing the same day, that is odd.
Yeah, that's.
I don't know. I'm not an executive who looks at release dates, so I don't know what the
Either
philosophy
they are
behind that
horrible at their job and they just didn't want this movie to succeed, and it became the biggest flop out of all of Disney's movies, losing. What was it? $79 million. $79 million. That's a lot of money. I'm surprised the directors even picked up after this. Like, they'd go on. I don't think any of their films are any special after this. Like, they made Princess and the Frog, which is fine, and Moana, which I think is just painfully average. I don't really get the hype behind that. Those films just don't have the heart this film has, but I'm not going to pretend it's perfect either. The fast pacing, again, is an issue. I don't think it's as prevalent as Atlantis, but there are some moments where I'm like, I need a little bit more from this. There's a great scene where John Silver, like, hesitates to shoot Jim, but it's happens so fast. It happens in the matter of a few seconds that you don't get enough time to, like, envelop yourself in the drama of the scene. It's just like, all right, blink and you miss it, and we're out. We're moving on. It's like, no, like, I need a little bit more fleshing out from these moments, and this is a film I definitely wouldn't mind, like, a longer cut of. Atlantis was one thing, but this film especially. Like, I think if you made it a longer cut and you changed around Ben's character, because Ben is actually based off a character from the original book, where in that one he's a crazy old man who, like, hit his head and lost his memory about the booby trap. Here, he's a robot that lost his memory. I hated Ben in the original book, and somehow the movie made the character even worse. I don't know how you pulled that off, but they did it somehow. Martin Short is just... He ruins most movies, and his character is just funny robot Scream, the character. And I just hated every second of him.
What I find so disappointing, though, is the fact that Disney, with their ever opportunistic marketing ideas, has never made an oversized USB key shaped like the back of Ben's head.
Well,
yeah.
I think in general, they just didn't really see much hope in this film, so that doesn't surprise me.
It's weird that you say that, because I was just reading this. So this movie took 10 years to make, having had the longest production cycle of any movie in Disney's post-Renaissance era, and after it went through production hell, though the production mainly started after the release of Hercules in '97.
Yes.
So maybe, I don't know, maybe at that point it just had been through so many iterations. So I imagine that, like, the little bit of production hell that Emperor's New Groove had was maybe tenfold behind this film. So when it came to time to actually release, they just kind of wanted it out there because they were, done with it. I don't know.
Guess so.
But 10 years working behind this to get everything put together. That's a lot of effort to go into this film, and I think it does translate on screen. It's just a shame that they undersold it with the marketing, and it just didn't do well in its time.
Yeah, there was just a bad release date too, and some people are like, this should have won the Oscar for Best Animated Film, but I'm like, Spirited Away won that year, and that's, as much as I love Treasure Planet, that's one of the greatest animated films ever made, so I don't know if I can agree with that one, Chief. But yeah,
as far as the traditional animation, for sure, although the way this blends in CG elements, there's something to that for its time.
Yeah, especially, like, very ambitious in that sense, even though the CGI doesn't hold up nearly as well as the hand-drawn elements, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, there's a lot about... I'm trying to think of what else to say. The music, again, great, fantastic stuff by James Newton Howard. I particularly love how the music transitions to the John Resnick songs. Like, it's so smooth and effortless. Like, it will go from, like, the party music and slowly fade out to, like, the guitar playing, like, the ending theme. Like, that transition is just magical to me. Like, it just gives me chills every time I hear the end of Always Know Where You Are. Like, those, again, could have been very cheesy songs that didn't fit the subject matter at all, but it's very clear they were made specially for this movie, and it just fits it so well. And the original score does too. And he made it in 2 months. Didn't have much time to do the music for this movie, but he still managed to pull off an incredible score.
I think the Treasure Planet deserves significantly more love, and every time I go back and rewatch this film, I find more and more things that I appreciate about it, right? Because obviously this film isn't flawless. There's plenty of just, plot contrivances that actually really help make the film as good as it is. Like, yeah, they can breathe in space, but who cares? They can breathe in space.
It's cool.
Now let's have an adventure.
Oh, that's something else I want to mention. The Metacritic for the score is also pretty low. Like, it's a 60, and almost every complaint was like, dude, why would you put Treasure Island in space? And it's like, you're shitting on the and that's it. Like, you're shitting on the concept of the movie, not the movie itself. Well, why would you make a Lego movie? That's so dumb. Why wouldn't you make like movie about actual characters instead of just Lego products? It's the same thing.
You should look up the reviews for Jimmy Neutron to see if they make the same complaints, or do people overlook it because it's Jimmy Neutron? I don't know.
That movie has a higher Metascore than this, which I think is BS, honestly. Jimmy Neutron's a fun movie, but come on. And Free Guy has a higher Metascore in this movie. Great, but the correct scores makes no sense. It's like, why not have a Treasure Island in space? Why don't you complain about actual problems with the movie? And they just
it's
did
not like
that.
It's a new idea either.
Yeah.
I was looking. There was an '80s movie called Space Island, which I think tries to tackle the same topic. I haven't seen it. I was looking on IMDb and I noticed that came up as people also search for. So I think this has been tackled before, but now it was Disney trying to do it.
Yeah,
and trying to make their technology, I guess, was up to snuff to create the vision that they had in mind for it.
You wanting a film to be a certain way does not dictate the innate bad quality of a movie. Like, it's...
Oh, exactly.
If reviews like that came out today, they would be memed to death. They would become the next Too Much Water. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, and I'm not I'm not entirely convinced they weren't paid off. But again, I'll stop my conspiracy theories for now, because that's ridiculous. But,
well, theory or not, it's pretty blatant to see that this movie, I think, has actually aged quite well. And I believe that as time goes on, more and more people will probably realize that Treasure Planet had a lot more going for it than the critics led them to believe.
That's a common theme of a lot of the movies we're talking about. Like, even Emperor's New Groove, which was well reviewed overall, isn't like the greatest Metascore, but it's like, I think it's a comedy that's held up really well, and it's genuinely hilarious. I feel like it deserves a little better.
It holds up surprisingly well considering all the production hell it went through and all the, and the ideas of what it could have been, and the fact they buried all the stuff that happened behind the scenes. But ultimately it was probably a good for the film overall to just go completely off the rails, and it holds up that mimetic value like we were discussing. But
Mason, you were listening in. Thank you for joining us, by the way. He is a indie filmmaker of sorts. We've collaborated many times in student projects. Mason, do you have any thoughts on The Emperor's New Groove, Atlantis, The Lost Empire, or Treasure Planet that you'd like to share with us right now?
Treasure Planet is awesome.
Hell yeah!
Yeah.
I fucking love it.
Yeah, man.
It's kind of like what you said in the Tron Legacy episode, where it's like, I wish there were more Disney movies like it, where it's not a shitty musical, it's not a shitty remake, it's not a princess movie, it's just a really fun adventure with a very solid character arc, and that's all it really needs to be.
And the sci-fi element too, like Disney should be going full tilt into the sci-fi world.
Give us more steampunk movies. I want more steampunk movies. This movie just made me fall in love with that aesthetic all over again.
It's also one of the last major hand-drawn Hollywood movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
The end era.
Where
if you guys ever do an episode on DreamWorks Sinbad Legend of the Seven Seas, you let me know, because...
Yeah, we'll bring you along for... Yeah, we'll add Road to El Dorado and The Prince of Egypt to that.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Awesome.
That'd be a heck of it. But that's a next episode topic.
Thank you for subbing up with those thoughts, Mason. And final thoughts on Treasure Planet, gentlemen.
I think it was a lot of fun coming back to this, and reintroducing it. I wish I didn't have those disturbing thoughts that came to mind, but I was looking into the world of piracy and the really awful things it did, and I think this isn't new either. People like overanalyzing Disney movies and looking into the darker themes behind
Excuse
it.
me. It's nothing new.
But I don't know, something about seeing potential groomers face immortalized in the clouds kind of doesn't resonate well. If you look at it that way, I mean, if you look at John Silver as a Weinstein type, Jesus Christ, it just changes the whole dynamic of the movie.
This movie is politically relevant, guys. It's super woke.
Well, you
Oh,
see,
God.
guys, if you make a film horribly uncomfortable, then it becomes really uncomfortable to watch.
No shit.
Putting
I'm
all
sorry,
of that
I'm-
aside, what would you
Okay.
give Treasure Planet?
All that aside, it's a solid movie. I think it's an excellent adventure, even though, Martin does come up short with the comedic value that he's proposed to bring to the table. He could lose that character, I suppose, but overall, I enjoyed it. I give it a 6.9 because that's my comfort food rating.
Nice.
Very nice.
What about you, Drew? Before I give my rating.
Oh man, Treasure Planet is a movie that I very unfairly sidelined as a kid, and having a chance to go back and actually appreciate it, the acting, the music, the capital A animation, especially in that beginning solar sail scene, still sticks out in my mind.
Yeah.
I think that this film really does deliver, and I want to give this at least a 7.5 out of 10. In my opinion, great film.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna give this one an 8 as well, but it's more positive, on the more positive side than The Emperor's New Groove. Like, this is closer to an 8.5, and that's closer to a 7.5. So yeah, 8 out of 10. It's one of my favorite 2D Disney films, which isn't saying a lot for me, but it's saying something. And it's more than just nostalgia. I think it holds up very well, and it's still a really great, elegant adventure. And I really wish we'd get more movies like it these days, for better and for worse. Thank you so much for joining us again, Drew. It's so good to have you back. Congratulations on Final Space Season 3 hitting Canada, buddy.
Oh yeah.
You're the best.
Absolutely. It's been a privilege joining you guys. Thank you so much for having me, and this has been fantastic.
This has been wonderful. We have a very interesting episode next week. We are back to our poll selection, so thank you, Stephen Beeson, for going through the trouble of going through this for us. We appreciate the effort. Devin, what crazy, wild episode do we have next week? Speaking of tonal changes from week to week.
This has been one that I think has been on the table for quite some time. Something that's been heavily advocated for by our resident horror fiend, Aaron Kramers. We are looking at The Golden Glove and other serial killer movies. I believe Manhunter and what's the third one?
Sorry. It was on there somewhere. I swear Steven mentioned this, but yeah, but at the very least, the Golden Glove and Manhunter, and one other movie that we will be making announcements for. Oh, hang on, we got this. Oh wait. Here it is. We got Manhunter, Man Bites Dog, and Golden Glove. All
yeah.
movies great for the family. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
This is such a bipolar podcast, and I love it.
Oh yeah, and the week after that, we're talking about Showgirls, The Full Monty, and Magic Mike. So it's just gonna keep being bipolar for a while. Hopefully, we could get Aaron Kramers on for the next episode. If you're listening, buddy, we look forward to having you. If you can join us. This has been another very special episode. Thank you, Mason, as well, for listening in. And is it Tuesday yet? Have a great night, guys. See you later. Next on Tuesdays with Moire.